Hi everyone. This week I finished a course in Faceplant, for Faceplant. This is on Udemy and on my website. And in there, well, we do a lot of fancy stuff, but one of the lessons is about resampling our own sounds. So this is what I wanted to focus on today. Here's the sound that we'll be working with. Some sort of Neuro kind of situation, a fairly simple sound. If we want to reverse engineer this a little bit, it's always a good idea to switch off some of the effect lanes and some of the modulators, although we need some of them. Let's switch off these effects here. So basically it's this movement here, which is done by the LFO, goes into the wavetable. Just a little bit. To make this wavetable, I use the tilt EQ. You can find it under the effects here. So the way this works is if you have a pretty simple wavetable, you can just go to effect, you say tilt EQ, you are now on this frame, and then you can set the value for that. So this is right now set to 0. The tilt EQ will take something from very bright and nasty to almost a sine wave like this. So you basically increase the values here for every keyframe, and you make it sort of nastier as you go up the wave. Let's listen to this, for example. Then you do a morph and you click all the points that you just created and you say done, and then you got yourself a very nasty waveform like that, with a lot of DC offset there as well. I'll go back to my original though. I just want to switch off the reverb for this and then just sample the whole thing. So it's always good to sample a bit of a low note. We are working with a G2 right there. So once we have that, we can export this sound, and I'll call this Faceplant G. I think that went to my desktop. So now I can go into Faceplant again, create a new sound, and I could drag in this sound. Now you could take a sampler here and just drag it into the sample area. You can also, in general, take things and drag them just anywhere, and then Faceplant will ask you what you want to do with it. So for example, you could immediately go into that wavetable generator. There seems to be a bug there, but there we have it in the wavetable generator. I don't want to do that right now though, so I will cancel out of this and just drag this into our sampler. Okay, so from here there's quite some things we could do, but the first thing is probably to fix the pitch. So it tries to guess what your pitch is, and as you can see it did that incorrectly because we were working with a G. You can of course always use a tuner to check on your tuning. Yeah, so right now I'm playing a D and it says it's a G, so that is not correct. Let's set this to G3 maybe. All right, and now we're pitch tracked, so we can go up and down. All right, that's nice. Now, another thing we might want to try at this point is some unison. Let's try 2 voices first, because it's already quite a busy sound. And we could go with one of the typical classical unison algorithms, or we can go with some of the creative ones. Freakstack uses the overtone series. It can be a very interesting one. That's not bad. We can assign this to a macro, and let's also use a mod map for that, so that we send this macro into, I said mod map, but I mean remap. That's just muscle memory. We can send this into the detune, and we create sort of a exponential curve there, and then we can hold option and copy this one, and we do this a little bit the other way around for the spreading. And the reason I do that is I want to spread to happen more aggressively than the detuning itself. So this one is for the detuning and this one is for the spread. So now if I raise this macro, you can see that the spread value is already very high, while the detuning is still in a very low range. Okay, so we have that. We call that unison, but then we type it correctly. Another thing you could do is, if you want to get fancy, you can get some sine operator here. And I've loaded it below the envelope right now, so this one doesn't go to the output. If I play any notes right now, we don't hear anything, and that's because we have no output stage here. That's exactly what I want, because then I can use this output here and send this into our phase to do some actual FM. And then we can set up another macro to control that modulation amount. So with this, we are basically raising the amount of FM. You could have also controlled the level there. We can try some unison for the FM as well. Pretty extreme that one is. It gets kind of nasty. Of course, you can try different ratios for your modulator. Right, let's just keep that there so that we have some color in case we want to use it later on. And then the main thing though I wanted to show you is the loop markers. This is one thing that we can of course not do when we are working with a regular wavetable or anything like this, but with these samples we can control the loop. So one thing that's nice to try is controlling this start amount. We could create a curve for that and set it so that it rises a little bit. And we can make that loop. Let's loop it infinitely. Let's keep the timing unsynced for now. Let's create a bunch of stages in here. And I'm fairly random with this because it's just, this is mostly a trial and error kind of thing. So we set this to our loop start there. So you can see it jumping around there. So we have these loop markers. Then there's another marker which is called the offset here. That's the starting point. So we have the loop start and the loop length besides that. If you go with the very short loop length, you get that distorted kind of sound. We can hear this if we switch off the start here. And this can be a cool one to automate as well, so you can increase the speed there. You could do this with an envelope, but the curve is a little bit more flexible. We can hold Option to copy that one and set it up to our, what did we say, the loop length here? Yeah, that will be that one. And you can make this sort of slow down over time so that the loop becomes longer and longer. I can give that some more amount there. We can then also change the start point to find cool areas in our sound. I like that part there. We can try this in combination with our curve again. So you can see we can create quite some chaos from that. With our crossfade, you can see these lines appearing there. This will crossfade the edges of the loop so that it can sound smoother. Generally, I'd like to keep this low because clearly we're not going for smooth here. You hear those clicks if you set 0%. So that's already nice. And then we can, of course, do all of our processing stuff again. So here we could go with a nonlinear filter and then choose the L-pass type. So a nonlinear filter, of course, will change its sound drastically based on the input level. Hence the non-linearity. So we can mess with this and see if we can get some different colors. Now with these modes here, you can actually hover over them and this will already preview the sound for you. You have to be a bit careful because some of them can be loud, but we can try this. I just hold the note and go over the different modes. This digital one can be really nice sometimes if you can tame it well enough. Yeah, so let's, for our purposes, let's go to saturated to, you know, try to be gentle here. After this, we can, of course, create filters as well. Now, because this is a nonlinear distortion, filters in front of the distortion will have a big effect on the sound as well. We can try some notches here. We could use this same curve thingy there to modulate this around a little bit, just for fun. You can also try positive gain there. Now, we don't necessarily need to boost the low end here, because what we could do is, let's fold this group down and call this main. And then we'll just add another, let's add an analog, and we'll use that for our sub. So maybe we want an envelope to control the pitch on that. So we get a bit of a typical kind of pitch slide. Let's, I don't know, a couple octaves, set the sustain down, fastest attack to do this kind of, let's mute this group. Ooh, that's a little bit loud. And we can drop that an octave, since we mentioned it would be a sub. Maybe we can even drop that 2 octaves. I would have to check with our original sample, but that sounds fairly sub-like. Now, if you want to get a little bit more color, of course, you could use your saturators there again. You could also let this FM itself, so you can take the output here and send it back into the phase. This will create your FM effects. With self-FM, we're very quickly going into this territory where it will sound as nasty as, no, I'm not gonna do a comparison there. It will sound very bright and very nasty. So we want to have only a bit of it, you know. You can see the big takes it more towards like saw area, where it starts to bend the curve. This is actually one trick that's also very cool. This allows you, little bits of FM allow you to create those wave shaper effects, as you find them in Serum and Massive, for example. You know, these bend modes, you can see that happening here. Let's use that for our sub. And then I don't want a full sustain on there. I just want it to be sub for a little while. So I can use the hold here. And so the short decay, short release. So we only get this sort of sub blast at the beginning. And of course, you can time this with your tempo. If you want to be really precise, you could use like a curve for that and tempo sync it, and etc, etc. But let's call this sub. Now, both of them so far go to lane 1. I could separate my sub. Do I want that? No, let's not do that. What I want to do is I want to create another envelope here on our main group. So above the analog, because this was just the operator, or modulator rather. So let's see if we can input a new envelope there. So now we are talking, let's go over this quickly. So we have our main group with the sample. It goes through this filter, it goes through this filter, then it goes through this envelope and to lane 1, and it goes through this envelope and to lane 2. So we're basically copying the signal because we added a new output stage here. And then below that we have this analog. This has no output. We just use it to modulate the phase, which is the same as the frequency, more or less, of our sample. So with this, we can now separate the signal. So we can, in lane 1, we could filter this out, just focus on the lows here, and we solo lane 1. We can create a bit of glide here. So let's use that. And then in here, you could use something like a channel mixer and then choose the, for example, mid only, to only filter out the mid channel. To first encode to mid side and then filter the mid channel. So now we're working with the mono sound here. And then for lane 2, we could actually take this filter and we just put that to a high pass and then listen to that. So here we have the bright frequency. Now we can make this very white. We can use Haas here, which will do that stuff. The saturator has a nice, or saturator rather, has a nice stereo control here. And of course we can start doing all our filtering shenanigans again. So one cool one would be to use the slice EQ. And let's fold these modulators down here a little bit, because with the slice EQ, if we have, let's say we have an LFO here, and we create some filters here. So let's say we want to create a notch there. You can see it pop up on the right side there. We can actually assign these. So we can assign this to a cutoff, and we get some notch control there. And we can do this basically with, I think, up to 32 bands. So yeah, this can create quite a lot of movement in your sound. You can create another one here. Set this up there. You could create a low pass as well. Let's resize this a bit. So here at the top you have your filter type. So I can input a low pass there. You could modulate this resonance as well. Let's do that with one of the curves that we already have. Let's say this one. Do a bit of resonance control. That scares me. Something like this. And let's enable this LFO. Let's slow them down a bit. So it's just about these little movements here. There's quite some movement already in the sound, but of course when we are starting to do this kind of stuff, let's control the filter offset there. For this we might want to use a bipolar macro, so you can right click, turn it to bipolar, and set it to the offset, because it is itself a bipolar control. Okay, filter, or let's call that slice EQ. And after this, of course, those distortions are gonna matter a lot again. So you can go with a shaper table after this. And now we can set up other controls to mess even more with this start and this length. So we have different sounds in there. You could also control the shift. With the shift, if you take it down far enough, the sample is actually going to reverse. And you can see that if I raise this macro, it's going to play backwards there. So we're reversing the sound with this control. We'll call this start. Now, of course, on that, disperser never hurts. Disperser creates phase shifts around a certain region. For bass, as usually we want to have it in this middle region. You can add a bit of pinch there. Something like this. So this will basically create these pitch slides within your sound. You can make the sound more thick and sort of thuddy. Maybe we can hear that, despite all the chaos we have created right now. Something like this. Now, after that, and I want to set the phase there a little bit to slow everything down. After that, we could create, I mean, we can just keep going here, right? We can do a flanger on this, it never hurts. Let's start with the low depth. And now you could of course start tweaking your curves here. And a small reverb with some compression never hurts. So I like to have a lot of early reflections on this so that it sounds very close, and then put your decay size down, and dampen can be down as well so that we get more bright frequencies. And after that we might want to use a bit of a carve EQ or any other kind of EQ to filter out some of those low mids here that tend to get excessive when you do this ridiculous kind of processing that we're doing. Something like this. We also have to make sure that both lane 1 and lane 2 are sending to lane 3. So right now we're doing something stupid because our sub is going to lane 2 and will then be spread. So that is not a great idea. We can send this, if we don't want this to go through the reverb, we can send this straight to master. Or we can send it to lane 3. All right, so that is some messed up sound for you there. I hope you find something useful in there. If you do, you're always free to comment or even like, imagine. And yeah, I hope to see you in another video. Thanks for watching.